Thanks for joining us. Thank you, edVentr, for organizing this quality, practical education for future, as it says, session, and for an opportunity to communicate more on things that I'm passionate about. My name is Krunal. I am head of marketing and growth at Fundkiss. We are a digital lending platform. We'll learn more about Fundkiss in a while, but to begin with, let me tell you a bit more about how financing works, what were the traditional ways of going about it, and how it's all been changed because of innovation and disruption. So to begin, the rise of fintech, the financial technologies, if you may. There has been disruptive innovation in almost every sector on earth because of the mass adoption of internet, technology, smartphones, and why should financial services be any different? So just as about every other sector in the world has been impacted by technology, so has the financial services sector as well. And much like every other sector's improvement, what technology has done to the financial services sector is help improve lives by helping reach the services to more people at the fraction of a cost. We'll get more into that as well. It also makes financial services more inclusive and accessible to people who are otherwise marginalized. And it challenges the status quo to make things better, just like everything else. Speaking of status quo, let's look at status quo in financing. Largely, the way the financing world has worked is, let's say you need money as a person or as a business. Your first bet would be family and friends. We always count on them for everything. But going above that, you would largely think of institutionals, such as banks, finance companies, leasing companies, to maybe get credit for your own personal finances or for your business. And it has largely been reserved to these large financial institutions that have had an established history of doing things in this area. They tend to be very risk averse. They tend to also require collateral or personal guarantee. If you ever tried to get credit from a bank or a loan, you would know what I'm talking about. You're supposed to put down a fixed deposit or your personal asset as a guarantee in case you're unable to repay your loans. The application processes are quite cumbersome. Typically, you would line up at a bank or get an appointment, go there physically, gather your documents. And it's not only cumbersome, but it's quite a lengthy credit experience as well, which sort of adds more barriers than necessary to the credit experience. With technology and internet connectivity, this should not be as complicated as it's meant out to be. Now, what happens when you combine technology with the power of people? Suddenly, you have all these innovative financing models that come into play, which is what our session is mostly about today. And when that happens, you actually give people more control of their money. They could decide where to invest, where specifically to invest, and all the nuances that go with your investment portfolio. You have more control over it, which also makes the investment more impactful. And impact is obviously very subjective and a personal thing. My investment into a local business, for instance, might feel more impactful to me than somewhere else where I might be getting a higher risk. Just because you have more control over where you invest, it's a very much more impactful investment. This has given rise to crowdlending, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer, all these different finance models. Now, it can get quite confusing. What is crowdlending? How does it differ from crowdfunding, peer-to-peer? In a lot of ways, a lot of these models are both crowdfunding as well as peer-to-peer financing, whereas crowdlending is obviously lending money from the crowd, borrowing money from the crowd. So let's get more deeper into these financing models, and we'll also go through some key players globally as well as in Mauritius. Let's look at crowdfunding. This is probably the most popular one. We've all come across some sort of crowdfunding campaign. And they're usually geared towards causes. So you might be a social or a personal cause or a project Now, backers usually do not receive a monetary reward, but you may receive a non-monetary reward, such as some sort of souvenir or participation in an event, etc., given to you exclusively because of your backing of the project, your funding of the project. Key players internationally is GoFundMe, quite well known. Anyone from almost everywhere in the world can finance a personal or a social project and raise money for it. More locally, you might have heard of edVentr or Small Step Matters. These are two really good local players which allow you to do more or less the same things. Small Step Matters has raised incredible amount of funds for social causes such as the Lagash shipwreck, for instance. Coste allows you to create money pots for your personal crowdfunding campaigns. So these are some of the local players in this space. Now let's look at project-based crowdfunding. Now, when we speak of this, these are either to sort of back projects that are social, creative, or entrepreneurial in nature. Again, here there aren't any monetary rewards to be expected, but you may receive, for example, if you sponsor something on one of these platforms, you might receive an exclusive early access to the product, or some sort of again a souvenir or some kind of access. Key players internationally are Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and tremendous amounts of online companies have started because of their campaigns on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. We're talking about more sustainable clothing brands, or shoe brands, technology companies. A lot of these have begun on platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. More locally, we have crowdfund.mu, who also does a great job at raising money for crowdfunding projects, social, creative, or entrepreneurial in nature. Now, we also have crowdfunding that is equity-based. What does that mean? That means the backers actually receive some sort of percentage ownership in the business that they're backing. So let's say you have a startup, you wish to raise 50,000 apiece in exchange for 5% of your company, etc. This could also be crowdfunded, and you could give away your equity to raise money for your startup or business venture. In the region, we have in South Africa, Uprise Africa. It's a good example of an equity-based crowdfunding platform. And locally in Mauritius, we have Olive Crowd, which does the same thing. Now, Crowdlending, that is debt-based, we'll look at that. And Fundkiss, we fall under this business model and category as well. This sort of business model allows finances business loans through peer-to-peer lending, but it is debt-based. There are no equity exchanged. The borrower usually has to agree on terms of repayment of that loan, including the interest, and they usually pay back in form of monthly repayments to the lenders. And lenders in exchange receive repayments that and earn interest income. This sort of finance model, how does it work, is essentially a marketplace. A lot of these crowdfunding models are essentially a marketplace. They connect demand and supply in some sort of way. More or less, we like to joke around and say that we're kind of like a Tinder of funding, business funding. So businesses are on the platform looking for funds to finance their growth, buy equipment, all sorts of other things. And then there are lenders who go through these project pages and decide to lend money depending on their personal preference. Fundkiss falls under this. We are a debt-based crowdlending platform to businesses. The other key players in the world are October.eu, huge platform in Europe, as well as you have funding societies who do quite well in Southeast Asia. They're based in Singapore. We operate on a similar business model as well. There are more debt-based crowdlending platforms, but these are for personal loans. So Fundkiss, as I mentioned, we only do business loans. It's a way for businesses to raise money to finance their growth. But if people wish to borrow money for personal reasons, there are also platforms available for that. Lending Works is a big one in UK. In Mauritius, more locally, we have recently seen finclub.mu come up as well. These, again, you would essentially put your project or your requirements on the platform. People will fund those projects. You would have to repay them with a monthly repayment and including interest. Let's go a bit deeper into Fundkiss and why sort of the digital financing through platforms like this, a peer-to-peer lending platform like Fundkiss, makes more sense sometimes than going to a traditional institution or the older way of doing things. As I mentioned earlier, we are a digital lending platform. We allow businesses to borrow from individual and institutional investors. So these are the two sides to Fundkiss. We exist for businesses to help them get financed. And we also exist for investors who wish to invest in these loans that go towards the businesses. We work with a combination of individual as well as institutional investors. Individuals meaning people like you and I, anyone over the age of 18. It's super easy to get started. You can get started as little as 5,000 rupees. And we also have institutional investors, which are big funds or professional investing funds that would also come in and invest on our platform and lend to these businesses. We create impactful investment opportunities because when we allow SMEs to get funded to people, we're using the liquidity in the market, money that you would have sitting around in a long-term savings account, for instance, or let's say just your personal change or savings that you wish to invest somewhere else. We actually allow you to invest that, earn a return on it, while funding the growth of SME sector in Mauritius. And as we know, SME sector accounts for a large majority of the jobs within the country, as well as overall GDP and economy of the country as well. So it's quite impactful what we do. Imagine being able to lend to a business and invest in something, and you could actually be a customer to that business and go and visit that little shop that might be there, or any bigger business. Our mission is simple. It is to simplify and democratize the access to financing for SMEs in Mauritius, while offering investors access to a new asset class. As I mentioned earlier, borrowing through banks, very cumbersome process. That isn't simple. It's very time consuming, and it's a lengthy credit experience. At the same time, SME loans has been a investment asset that has previously only been reserved to banks. So normally how it has worked is we all give our money to the banks. We put that in a savings account or something. The bank in turn lends that money out to businesses. You may earn a reasonable interest rate on your savings account, but the bank takes most of the interest that they're collecting as an income from the loans they give out. So previously, this entire SME loans or business loans was reserved for large institutions. Now we democratize that by allowing individuals to lend money to businesses and connect them directly forward. How do we do that? It all happens on our platform, Fundkiss.mu. If you're a borrower, let's say your business wishes to borrow money, you would sign up as a borrower. You would go through a due diligence process. Basically, it's a completely online process. You do not need to personally come and visit us. Submit all your documents. We make sure that your business has the repayment capacity. What we usually ask for is at least 2 years of operations and banking information. So and we require 2 years of business operations only because the loans are unsecured. We don't ask for any kind of collateral. We don't ask for any kind of personal guarantee. In exchange, we just need you to have 2 years of business operations to get started. Then you would go through a credit assessment process where our team would basically make sure that you have the repayment capacity and you are able to repay the loans on time. And then your project goes live on our platform. And then the lenders and investors basically can come in and fund those projects, the ones that they feel most inclined to. So that's why we say we allow pre-approved borrowers to raise funds from lenders to support their growth and operations. The reasons for borrowing could be to afford an expansion or acquire machinery or working capital purposes, for instance. So the implementation of our peer-to-peer lending business model happens through our platform, Fundkiss.mu, which is where you should check out more about us and learn more about us as well. We operate with a peer-to-peer lending license from Financial Services Commission of Mauritius, which takes care of all the non-banking related financial services in the country. Now, why would businesses choose to get financed through a platform such as Fundkiss, and why would lenders and investors choose to do it, choose to invest their money through Fundkiss into SME loans? So for businesses, our biggest sort of selling point would be that it's an unsecured business loan. This is helping make financing and credit more accessible to SME community in Mauritius. We do not ask for any collateral. It's a quick and fully online application process. You have access to our lender community in the sense that people who will invest in your business also inherently come to know about the business. You get to access the Fundkiss's borrower community, other borrowers such as yourself. You become a part of the community where we sort of invite you to get involved with us and engage with us through networking events, supporting business activities, things along those lines. Every time a campaign for a business project goes online, we also market it out through our social media, website, etc. And that in turn also allows businesses to have some visibility. It's an opportunity for businesses to move their credit experience to a more digital, bureaucratic-free environment. And time again, we come to hear from our borrowers that it is the personalized customer service that keeps getting them back to us. Now for lenders or investors, what might be their reasons for picking and choosing to invest with Fundkiss? The biggest one is diversification of the investment portfolio. If you are an investor, you would look to diversify your portfolio. And prior to this, debt financing has not been available to individual investors such as you and myself. You get solid returns with attractive interest rates. We'll go into that further as well. You actually have an impact on the local economy because you're supporting the growth of SMEs around you. There's really great tax incentives in Mauritius when it comes to interest income from peer-to-peer lending. Essentially, any interest income that you earn from peer-to-peer lending, you end up paying about 3% in tax after all the tax incentives the government provides, the MRA provides. So great incentives there. You can begin as low as 5,000 rupees. And you can be assured that, yes, while every single sort of investment has some kind of risk associated with it, at Fundkiss, the rigorous credit assessment process makes sure that we handpick the businesses very carefully. In fact, only 5% of all the applications that come to us actually get to go on the website and get financed. So it's very rigorous procedure. Best of all, there are no fees for investing, absolutely none. So it's absolutely free to lend on the Fundkiss platform and get started, as well as ongoingly, there are absolutely no fees to lenders and investors. Now, why should you listen to me? I've heard from the borrowers themselves, and what we tried to do was, I ran a survey with the team, and we spoke to almost every single individual borrower on the phone or sometimes in person, and we tried to collect this survey, and we asked them a few questions. For example, have they considered other financing options before coming to Fundkiss? And 57% of people said yes, they have. Now, these could include banks, leasing institutions. These include cooperative funds, private equities, etc., etc. So more than half of the people or businesses that we have financed have indeed considered other options before they came to Fundkiss. And then we asked them what were the reasons for considering other options before coming to Fundkiss. The biggest one was already a customer. So typically you might already be a bank account holder at a certain bank. So it makes sense to approach them first for all your financing needs. This to us indicated that there was some sort of passive loyalty there. So since you've already established a account somewhere, you tend to stick to it. Their other reasons included they weren't actually aware of Fundkiss, which means there was lack of options. The only options they were aware of are the traditional sort of financial institutions that exist. The third reason they considered someone else before coming to Fundkiss was because of special schemes or rate of interest. These could be, semi-public or public grants available, as well as special interest rates available. The problem with that is that not everyone qualifies for this, and as soon as the budget for that sort of fund runs out, it's not available to everybody. We also asked them why then they chose to come to Fundkiss. Why did they choose to get financed through us? And we allowed them to pick multiple answers for this particular question. The biggest reason we found was we could give out a loan without any personal guarantee or collateral. This goes back to our mission of simplifying, democratizing the credit experience of SMEs in Mauritius and making it more inclusive. Suddenly, people who previously thought they could never have access to credit, perfectly fine businesses, just unable to come up with the collateral or personal guarantee, suddenly had an option. So this was their biggest reason. The second biggest reason was speed of application and the speed of funding, very closely related to each other. Typically, a project would get funded within 2 weeks on average on the Fundkiss platform. The fastest one so far has been 3 minutes. So it can be quite fast. And once the project is funded on the platform, the disbursement usually occurs within 3 to 4 working days. So super quick. Same goes for the online application process. And particularly because of the pandemic, it really eased their lives to not have to come personally and visit us and just have the entire online loan application process online. And so speed, the ease, the convenience, again, tying back to our mission of simplifying the credit experience, making it more inclusive and democratizing it. These are the reasons why they chose us. We asked them for more comments on other reasons that they might choose Fundkiss and sort of these newer digital financing options, I guess. Was also, again, we come back to service a lot. We personally deal with every single business that applies at Fundkiss. The application process and the help they receive from the team, as well as added value other than credit. Now, this again refers to things I mentioned in the past, which is exposure to our Fundkiss network and business community, as well as exposure through our social media, through our community and our engagement with events, etc. Let's look at some quick stats of how Fundkiss has done in its 2 years of operations. To date, we have financed over 150 projects. So it's really, I can't give it a specific number because every day we put new projects online. The total loan production to date is we're just 1.9 million short of reaching 100 million. So as soon as the end of the month, end of October, we very well would have a total loan production of 100 million Mauritian rupees. That's 100 million rupees reallocated in a way to support the SME sector, to support the local businesses and keep the economy going. Meanwhile, producing great returns and giving impactful investment opportunities to investors and lenders. The average interest rate for borrowers when they borrow is about 13.96%. It's an average one because depending on your repayment capacity, depending on the length of the project, etc., it varies. But typically, it's between 12 to 14%. Typically, there's a great diversity in the type of projects we finance on our platform as well. So, a project as small as 50,000 Mauritian rupees, that's our minimum. All the way up to the biggest project we've financed till date is 4 million rupees on the platform. We can finance projects up to 5 million at this point. Great diversity in terms of, all the way from sole traders, tabachin owners, or small mom and pop stores, all the way to SMEs with close to 100 employees, for instance. 62.5% of the projects are actually SME projects, so established bigger businesses with multiple employees. 37.5 usually tend to be sole traders. Let's look at the top industries that borrow from us. So in the past financial year that ended back in June, the biggest industry we dispersed to was wholesale and retail trade, closely followed by agriculture, closely followed by construction. Again, you see a great diversity of businesses and SMEs that are being supported here. Let's look at the reasons of borrowing in the past financial years. Working capital to support everyday functions and expenses of the business was the #1 reason people borrowed from Fundkiss, followed by capital expenditure. These include the expansion, the acquisition of assets or machinery, things along those lines. Third biggest was supply chain. This is to bridge the gap between acquiring, let's say, inventory or products for sale, and then selling it on to distributors and so on. Some quick stats on investor side of things. Till date, we have over 2,854 registered lenders. That was earlier in the week. The number may have changed in the last couple of days, but and it keeps going up every day. These registered lenders, again, include individuals like you and me who just wish to invest, as well as institutional investors and sort of funds that wish to get involved. The average interest rate that lenders received last financial year was about 11.7 on average on their investment. Now, this typically tends to be much better than a traditional, let's say, a fixed deposit account or something. The average lending ticket, so the average amount lent by people to projects, it tends to be around 28,000 rupees. Now, again, we mentioned earlier the power of people when it's met with technology. So in terms of amount invested, 84% of all the projects are funded by individuals, and only 16% by institutions and big funds. Hope that tells you a lot more about the business models and everything. What's next? If you wish to learn more about Fundkiss, as well as this particular industry of digital financing, as a pioneering platform in Mauritius, we have taken it upon ourselves to not just carry on with the business, but also educate people on how the industry works, how this business model functions, and everything along those lines. You can visit fundkiss.mu. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website at fundkiss.mu. If you wish to learn more about the industry and how Fundkiss works, as well as everything that goes behind peer-to-peer lending, visit our blog. We've put some great resources there for you, as well as videos, webinars, so on blog.fundkiss.mu to learn more about us. With that, that's the end of my presentation. We'll take questions for sure. But should you wish to contact me or Fundkiss in any way with further questions, feel free to email me personally at krunal@fundkiss.mu. Give us a call, 218-2195, and the website is always available as well.